All right, for this next series of videos, we're going to be looking at plugging data into our procedural setups to create information design. The first and most basic setup that we're going to do is a bar chart. So let's see here. Just make a brand new scene. All right. Frame rate doesn't matter. I don't like looking at the bright white, so I'm just going to set that back. Okay. So the first thing we're going to need is some bars, and to make that, I'm going to Alt-click on a cube, Alt-click with the cube, with the square selected, Alt-click on the duplicator, set the distribution to linear, maybe spread it out, and that's fine for now. The next thing we're going to need is some data. So just as a test file, I've created this fruit test data, and you can create your own. In fact, later on in this series, I want you to create your own. And Cavalry facilitates links to Google Sheets, which is super handy. And all you need to do is populate your spreadsheet, go to share, and make sure your permissions set to anyone with the link on the internet. Okay? So I'm going to copy the link, back in Cavalry, right click, import Google Sheet, paste it in there, and then hit OK. Awesome. So then for every array, for every list of numbers that you're going to use, or list of numbers, list of colors, list of characters, whatever it is, you need to add an instance of that spreadsheet into the timeline, okay? Because how it works is each column is treated as an array. That's the kind of big insight into how Cavalry works, right? So there's an array for the names of the fruit, there's an array for the amount, there's an array for other stuff that we'll get to later, all right? So let's just start with amount, all right? I'm going to grab the amount and, well, let's just what happens if I just plug this in here. So I'm going to plug it into my duplicator. Let's see, shape scale Y. Oh, that actually worked better than I thought it was going to work. Okay, so what is happening is it is multiplying the numbers in the spreadsheet by whatever numbers are set in your initial shape, which is set to 100 pixels. So if we look back on the web, apples is multiplied by 5, oranges by 2, bananas 10, lemons 3, and limes 6. In fact, let me put these. I'll leave them for now. All right, so let's see. The first thing we need to do is match the number of duplicated squares to the numbers of rows in our sheet. Cavalry doesn't know how many rows are in there, so you have to tell it. The next thing we might want to do is, it's a bar graph, right? And so a bar graph usually rests along the bottom, so you can kind of compare the heights across the bars. So to do that, we could use this. So I'm hitting Control, period, and I'm making an align. And what an align does is it actually just moves the pivot point to the bottom of whatever, or moves the pivot point wherever you want with the set of shapes. So if I grab my align, and add it to the deformer of the rectangles, nothing happens. But see, what I can do is I can shift the pivot point, in this case, to the bottom of the Y, and now we're having something that looks a little bit more like a bar graph. Let's see here. What if I had extreme numbers in here? Right now it's actually just working out way better than I thought it would, but let's see. I'm going to move the whole thing down a little bit. What if I had just like insane numbers? I mean, actually, you can already see it. If I zoom out here, it's going off the bounds of the graph. How do I control it? Well, there's a number of different things that are being multiplied into each other. Most of them are set to 1, so it just keeps multiplying by 1 and nothing changes. But there's a lot of places to change those values. I think the most elegant way to do this for this graph and for the future is to remap our numbers, okay? So I'm going to set this from none to number range. The minimum is going to be 0. The maximum is going to be whatever our biggest number is. And you can sort things to find the biggest number here in your spreadsheet, but for right now, there's just 5 things. The biggest number is 10. And then what we can do is we can remap those numbers to a range of our choosing. So what that's going to do is, well, one, it's going to give us control over how tall these bars are, but 2, we're not going to be introducing any transformations or weird scaling into our setup, which is going to make it a little easier to play with later on. Okay, so now I'm using this maximum number to control how high up these bars go. All right, what's next? Well, I don't know what these are. They're just 5 bars, right? So let's add another instance of this. I also think it's really a good practice to start naming things. So I'm going to call this amount, and then I'm going to rename this maybe fruit. And I'm going to set this from amount to fruit. Fruit is actually text. It is the labels. So I'm going to turn remapping off. I need something to plug this into, right? So I'm going to make another text field this time. So instead of a square, we're going to make a text field. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to set it to linear. I'm going to make 5 of them. All right, it's already set to 5. I'm going to move them over. And here's where these things evolve, right? You would imagine that you want the labels to line up to the bars. So what you would do is you will start using one thing to drive another. And this is also where renaming stuff becomes really critical. So I'm going to call this bars, and then I'm just going to say driver. Okay, so then as I change things that I want to affect every other instance, every other parameter in my chart, I know where to look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the size. I'm going to drag it into this one, which I should probably rename, but I'm plug it into size. And now as I change the size of my bars, the text goes for a ride. All right. So let's see. How about, before I take things any further, let's just make this a little easier to look at. Maybe I want them to, oh, you know what? Let's just center them under the columns. So Center, top, sure. I'm not going to worry about the typeface. Maybe I'll make them a little smaller. And now I have to plug a list into these. So before we use the fruit, the amount. Now I'm going to grab the fruit and plug it into the text. And now we are cooking. All right. What else could we do? It might be nice to color code these, right? We could change the design. If we want to, for example, change how these, whoops, not that one. Oh yeah, that is that one. Just don't hit Alt. I can change the width of the bars. We could assign some colors. So let's just grab a palette. How about, yeah, simple. And then new create array from palette. Okay. Then I'm going to plug that array into my fill color. I'll plug it again into the text, fill color, and now we're cooking. And we can have our own palettes. I think you can even import palettes from other application. You know, I could make the apple, like apple-y and orange and so forth, right? All right, and that, we're gonna keep kind of layering complexity on here, but that's basically how this works, okay? You grab values from the sheet, they're a list, and you assign them to the same number of shapes in another list. All right.